The color drained from Marcus Chen's face as the full weight of his catastrophic error crashed down on him. His mind raced through the implications: personal, professional, corporate. Apex Electronics didn't just sell MillerTech products. They were one of MillerTech's largest retail partners, with contracts worth hundreds of millions annually. Marcus's own position, his career, his reputation, everything suddenly hung by the thinnest thread. "Mr. Miller, I didn't know," Marcus stammered, then immediately realized how that sounded, that he'd have treated the situation differently if he'd known the boy was rich. David's expression hardened. "That's precisely the problem. You didn't know, and it shouldn't have mattered." By now, the entire store had gone silent. Every customer, every employee watching the scene unfold. Phones were out, recording. This would be on social media within minutes. David continued, his voice quiet but carrying through the space. "My son came into your store with honestly earned money to buy a birthday gift for his father. He was profiled, accused, humiliated, and removed based purely on his appearance. In front of dozens of witnesses, you made a judgment about his character, his worth, his right to be treated with basic human dignity." Marcus tried to speak, but Sarah Chen, MillerTech's chief legal officer, stepped forward. "Mr. Chen, I'm sure you're aware of the partnership conduct clause in your contract with MillerTech Industries. Section 12, Paragraph 4 specifically addresses discrimination and corporate values alignment." Marcus was aware, painfully aware. That clause gave MillerTech the right to terminate partnerships if a retailer's conduct violated their corporate values, which explicitly included dignity and equal treatment for all customers. Tom Rodriguez, Marcus's own senior manager, couldn't stay silent. "Sir, I tried to tell security earlier, but I was in the back office. I saw what happened on the cameras. The boy did nothing wrong. He was polite, careful, clearly just trying to make a purchase." The betrayal from his own staff cut deep, but Marcus knew Tom was protecting himself, rats fleeing a sinking ship. David turned to address the gathered crowd, customers and employees alike. "I built my company on a simple principle, that innovation and success should benefit everyone, not create barriers between people. I grew up poor, very poor. I know what it's like to walk into a store and feel the weight of judgment, to be treated as less than human because your clothes aren't right or your shoes are worn." He gestured toward the door, where Ethan was visible through the glass, still sitting on the bench. "That boy out there is the most important person in my life. He doesn't know the full extent of our financial situation because I've chosen to raise him with humility, with understanding of what most people face every day, with empathy. He does odd jobs and saves his money because I've taught him the value of work and earning. And today, your CEO taught him a different lesson, that the world judges you by your appearance, that money determines your worth, that power excuses cruelty." Marcus felt his knees weaken. David continued, "I spend most of my time in our manufacturing facilities, working alongside our employees, understanding their lives. I live modestly because excess has never interested me. Every dollar I don't spend on myself goes into worker benefits, education programs, community investment. My son wears secondhand clothes because we donate to family shelters. He uses an old phone because children in our company's orphanage sponsorship program need technology more." The MillerTech CFO stepped forward with a tablet. "Mr. Chen, I'm authorized to inform you that effective immediately, MillerTech Industries is suspending its partnership with Apex Electronics pending a full review of corporate practices and culture. This affects approximately $240 million in annual contracts." Marcus actually swayed on his feet. This would devastate Apex's quarterly numbers, possibly tank their stock price, and certainly end his career. But David wasn't finished. He turned to the gathered employees. "To the staff of this store, this isn't your fault. Most of you had nothing to do with this decision. However, I'm offering any of you who are interested positions with Miller Tech retail partners who understand that every customer, regardless of appearance or perceived wealth, deserves respect. Several employees immediately looked interested, already calculating their escape from the sinking ship. Sophie, the cashier, raised her hand tentatively. "Mr. Miller, I just want to say, I thought your son was sweet. I was going to ring up his purchase. I'm sorry I didn't speak up." David's expression softened slightly. "Thank you. That means something." He turned back to Marcus. "I don't enjoy this. I don't take pleasure in professional destruction. But I will not allow my son's humiliation to pass without consequence. Not because he's my son, but because he represents every child, every person who's ever been judged unfairly." Then, in a gesture that stunned everyone, David bowed. A deep, formal bow of the kind that carries profound cultural weight. "I apologize on behalf of adults who have failed to create a world where children are treated with universal dignity." The four Miller Tech executives followed suit, bowing in unison. It wasn't Marcus they were bowing to. It was the acknowledgement of failure, a collective recognition that the system had broken down. Marcus, instinctively, automatically, found himself bowing in return, though his bow was one of desperate apology, of career-ending recognition of catastrophic error. David straightened and walked toward the door without another word. Outside, he sat beside Ethan on the bench and finally, truly, smiled. "Ready to go home, buddy? We have a birthday to celebrate, and I believe you were trying to buy me a gift." Ethan looked at his father with new eyes, seeing both the man he'd always known and the titan he'd never suspected. "Dad, who are you really?" David pulled his son close. "I'm your father. Everything else is just details. Now let's go get pizza, and you can ask me anything you want." As they walked to the Mercedes, Ethan turned back to see through the store windows Marcus Chen standing alone, his career, his reputation, his future irrevocably changed by a single moment of prejudice. The weight of regret visible even from a distance. The boy's quiet warning had proved prophetic. "You'll regret this." Inside the car, as his father drove them toward home, toward normalcy, toward the life they'd carefully constructed together, Ethan finally asked the question that mattered most. "Why didn't you tell me?" David was quiet for a moment, navigating traffic, then answered with characteristic honesty. "Because I wanted you to understand the world as most people experience it, to develop empathy, to know that worth isn't measured in bank accounts. Today was horrible, and I'm sorry you went through it. But you learned something important. You learned how it feels to be judged unfairly. And that education, painful as it is, will make you a better man." Ethan considered this, then smiled slightly. "Did we just destroy that guy's entire career?" David sighed. He destroyed his own career the moment he chose cruelty over kindness. We just revealed the consequences. As the Mercedes merged onto the highway, heading toward a modest neighborhood where a Miller Tech billionaire lived in a simple ranch house, where a 12-year-old boy did his homework at a second-hand desk and learned that true wealth had nothing to do with money. The greatest lesson of all settled into Ethan's young mind. Power without compassion is tyranny. Wealth without generosity is poverty. And success without humanity is ultimate failure. Behind them, in a gleaming electronics store that would soon close permanently, Marcus Chen learned those same lessons far too late. The cost of his education measured in everything he'd lost for failing to see the humanity in a boy with taped-together shoes and a $20 dream. The story spread across social media that night. Videos of David Miller's quiet confrontation and profound bow going viral, sparking nationwide conversations about dignity, respect, and the arbitrary cruelty of judgment based on appearance. And somewhere in a modest home, a father and son shared birthday pizza, the most expensive gift already given, not the technology empire or the vast wealth, but the lesson that how we treat the vulnerable defines who we truly are. This story explores themes of dignity, compassion, and the consequences of prejudice while delivering an emotionally powerful narrative about a father's love and a son's humiliation transformed into profound life lessons. David Chen had spent the past week in a state of profound discomfort. The viral attention, the news interviews, the constant messages from well-wishers and media outlets, all of it had been overwhelming and completely contrary to his nature. He was a private person by temperament, someone who'd learned long ago that the best way to get through difficult circumstances was to keep your head down and focus on what you could control. What you could control was limited, but it was something. You could control your effort, your presence, your love for your child. The rest of the world, with its chaos and cruelty and unpredictability, was something to be endured rather than engaged with. Lucas had been thrilled by his father's sudden fame, at least initially. The boy had even smiled more over the past few days, the burden of his illness temporarily lightened by the excitement of seeing his father's image on television and reading comments from strangers who called him a hero. But David knew that Lucas understood, with the wisdom that came from fighting cancer since age 5, that fame was ephemeral. What mattered was whether the cancer would return, whether the latest treatment protocol was working, whether he'd have 5 more years with his son or 50. When the message came, delivered through the hospital's social worker, written by Marcus Sterling's assistant in formal business language, it caught David off guard. The CEO, once recovered enough to communicate, wished to meet with him, to thank him in person, to discuss what David had described in one interview as the strange grace of being in the right place at the right time. David's first instinct was to decline. He didn't want anything from Marcus Sterling. He didn't want to be made into a symbol or a story. He wanted to return to his ordinary life, to the struggle of keeping Lucas healthy, to the quiet satisfaction of knowing he'd done the right thing. But then Lucas had read the message. David had shown it to him, thinking the boy might find it interesting, and Lucas's eyes had widened with the kind of wonder only a child could muster. "Dad, the guy you saved is a really important man. Maybe he wants to be your friend," Lucas had said with a simplicity that cut through David's resistance. How could he deny his son this possibility of connection? How could he deny a man who'd been given a second chance the opportunity to express his gratitude? David agreed to the meeting. It was set for 2 weeks after Marcus's collapse, once the CEO had recovered enough to leave the hospital. The meeting place would be neutral ground, a cafe not far from the hospital, a place that was public and unthreatening. David dressed carefully for the meeting, choosing clean jeans and a button-down shirt, neither the casualness of his everyday wear nor something that felt false. He brought Lucas with him. The boy was curious, and David found he didn't want to attend the meeting alone. They arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, sitting at a table by the window, watching the street. Lucas sipped a hot chocolate while David drank black coffee, both of them quiet. David felt his heart rate elevating as the appointed time drew near. What did you say to a man whose life you'd saved? How did you acknowledge the profundity of such a moment without becoming maudlin or pretentious? When Marcus Sterling appeared, walking slowly but under his own power, David's breath caught. The man looked diminished from the footage David had seen, his face pale beneath a careful application of makeup, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose on a frame that had lost weight during his hospital stay. But his eyes held something new. A kind of humility, perhaps, or a searching intensity that hadn't been present before.